Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to our Tuesday, September 5th school board meeting. We will start with our agenda approval, deletions, additions. Dr. Baracco.
Thank you. You have a revised agenda at your workstation. One typographical correction on Roman numeral 7A2 and some revisions under 7B1, Mrs. Castaneda's personnel. Thank you.
Move to approve the revised agenda.
Motion by Dr. Medlin.
Second? Oh, sorry.
Second by Mrs. Kelly. Any discussion, any questions? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Is there any correspondence, Ms. Kelly?
There is not.
Thank you. Our liaison updates. Mr. Marshall.
Thank you. I have nothing to report as of this meeting.
Mrs. Kelly.
I have nothing for redevelopment. Cherville Parks, on September 16th at Reeder Park from 12 to 7, they will be holding their Country Affair event, and they have partnered with the Cherville Chamber for their annual corn roast as well. So come on out and see us. So,
Great. Thank you. Dr. Medlin.
Nothing to report, thank you.
Dr. Malco.
Okay, on this Saturday from Lake Central Education Foundation, we are hosting our 5K that honors heroes that have been a part of our life. This generated 3 years ago when we had the loss of Dana Les. She was an LC graduate who lost her life exiting a hospital in the Chicago suburbs. And now we've added a recognition to Mr. Tarka. Jim Tarka evidently was watching the Olympics back in 1970, whatever, and he saw them do the marathon. He thought, what a neat idea. We need that here in the region. That formulated into the Calumet Striders, which of course I'd never heard of till I learned a little bit about it, and it also formulated the Gold Cup race. So Mr. Tarka is somebody who has touched a lot of our lives in many ways through that race format, but also he's an American veteran, and he is an integral part of the group that's putting together the new American Legion on US 41 in St. John. So he is our next honoree, and hope to see you there. That is this coming Saturday. The race starts at 9 o'clock. And then on the following Saturday, I'm hopping to Dyer Parks now. Is that okay, Mrs. Suze?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, on the following Saturday, which is September 16th, the Dyer Parks Department is hosting, as we talked last time, the actual presentation of the Gold Star flag, or the Gold Star Memorial. Dave Nowazik, who was a Lake Central student, was killed in action, and his mother somehow was able, over the years, to get privy to a second Gold Star monument in the state of Indiana. And evidently we're only supposed to have one, but somehow we got a second one. So they are really honored, and we are really honored to have that to be placed in Dyer, and that will be at Centennial Park there, which is north of town, same day as your event.
plenty of time in the day.
Well, I don't have a time for all the activities yet, but I'll try to send that out to
Is it
you via
1?
email.
Is it for, I think for you, is it 1 o'clock? Is that when the
I
dedication is?
haven't received it. You might know more than I do.
I thought Kathy LaRue told me it was at 1, but I could.
Okay, I'll check into it. Thank you. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And for my committees, Dollars for Scholars, tickets go on sale for homecoming on the 11th. And the Parks Department is selling Boo Bash bales and Christmas trees. So if you want to decorate a tree or a boo, hay bale, just reach out to the St. John Parks Department.
Did you say hay bales?
Hay bales, yes. Yeah.
Bash
Yeah.
bales, I like it.
So with that, we'll move to our official school board business topics consent agenda. Dr. Baracco.
Thank you again, Mrs. Suze. Seek board approval for the minutes from our regular meeting on August 21st. Also seek board approval for the claims, payroll, and extracurricular expenditures you received last week.
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Malco. And I will second that. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We have no public comments regarding action items, so we'll move right into our official school board business topics regular agenda. Dr. Baraco.
Well, thank you again. Late last spring, we reviewed as we were reviewing our board policies, we talked about our booster organization and submittal of documents. Our policy called to ask our booster clubs to annually give us a financial report and also a list of their officers for the upcoming year, just so we have that contact information. I'm happy to report that with some prodding from our principals, where we've gotten almost all of that stuff in. And so I want to thank all of our booster clubs for submitting that information. I do want to clarify for the board, though, that financial report isn't necessarily an audit. It's just a report that shows their revenues and expenditures for the year. And so it is not in our board policy that we analyze their income or expenditures. So that was my first item. My second item is in the last batch of board policies that you did approve at our last gathering, there's one policy that has been held out, and it has to do with web accessibility, content, apps, and services. It's a complicated policy. It's been updated about 3 times in the last 4 updates because things are changing quickly in this area. We have some issues that we've got to work through. Some of the apps that staff members used or are using or have used may not be licensed for commercial use. They're designed for personal use, and the companies then believe once they start using it en masse with students as part of their job, that's commercial use. So we've got to work through, okay, which ones would we need to avoid for that purpose? Some of them want to charge us after rolling it out for free for a couple of years. Some don't have the ability to archive information if the app is being used to communicate with students, where you have a separate board policy that calls for that. So we are investigating maybe a way to have an application that will help us do a lot of these things all at once. But in case the board was wondering why that 7540 didn't get updated in the last packet, it's because it's still a work in progress, but you will see it again this fall.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? All right, we'll move right into our Assistant Superintendent, Mrs. Castaneda.
Thank you. For my first item, I am seeking your approval for the revised copy of the personnel packet that you received this evening.
Motion to approve?
Motion by Mrs. Kelly,
Second.
second by Dr. Medlin. Any questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And my other item is to seek your approval for the professional leave request that was in the board packet.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Marshall,
I'll second that.
second Mrs. Kelly. Questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. And our Director of Primary Education, Dr. Bracy.
Good evening. I am seeking approval for the professional leave request provided in your packet.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Marshall,
I'd like to second that.
second by Dr. Malco. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Our Director of Secondary Education, Mrs. Schoeneman.
Thank you. For my first item, I'm seeking your approval for the professional leave request that you received in your board packet.
Move to approve the professional leave requests.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Medlin, a second by Mr. Marshall. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. For my second item, I'm seeking your approval for the field trip request that you also received in your packet.
Motion to approve?
Motion by Mrs. Kelly,
Second.
second by Dr. Malco. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. And we'll move right into our Director of Facilities, Mr. Ledger.
Excuse me, before we move on, will we do anything to recognize Mrs. Baldwin with her honor that she received? The Indiana Secondary French Teacher. of the
For
Year.
the French teacher. Actually, we just discussed that at the department meeting at the high school today. So more info to follow.
So you're going down with her or something, I'm assuming it's in Indy, and then you'll make a presentation to us?
Well, no, I don't know all of those details yet, but I will find out. Yep. And then I'll cut back to you with that.
Very cool.
Thank you. But very exciting.
Yeah, that's very exciting.
Mr. Ledger.
Thank you, Mrs. Seuss. Just a brief update on the projects that are ongoing right now. Bibbage project, as Mrs. Susan knows, who's out at our OAC meeting today, we're right on schedule. In fact, a little bit ahead of schedule. We'll finish detailing all the steel here this week at the cafeteria. All the 4 classroom edition and the 10 classroom edition steel's been detailed. We are finishing up some final grading this week and putting down some topsoil. The landscaper's supposed to be out next week to do the ponds and everything. We have the CMU, the interior CMU, the concrete block on the 10 classroom edition. We'll start the 4 classroom edition this week as well. The exterior metal framing's going on, and we are stocking the roof tomorrow on the 10 classroom edition. We'll start roofing it in this week over there.
Excuse me, Mr. Ledger.
Yes.
What is the CMU?
Concrete masonry unit, concrete block.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So-
And that's all at Bibbage?
Yes.
Okay.
And as I said, we'll stock the roof tomorrow, and we'll start roofing the 10 classroom edition this week as well. On the Bremer Middle School, as I said last meeting, this month, we are ongoing with some temperature control wiring for the heating. All the air conditioning's done, except for a couple zones, like by the boiler room. That will be finished this week. We'll start the heating temperature control next week. That's all behind the scenes. It's all in the mezzanines and the boiler rooms. As well as we're finishing up the insulation. The insulation is supposed to be done the week of the 18th. That, again, is in the mezzanines and boiler room. So that we should wrap up here behind the scenes here by the end of the month. So that's going very well as well. The baseball, softball varsities lights, all the underground work is done. All the bases are set. Our poles are supposed to come. I haven't got an affirmative date yet, but they're supposed to be shipped the week of the 18th. So here in the next 2 weeks, we should be seeing them. And the electrician's gonna have to punch in to the maintenance building in the baseball press box to set the panels, but basically, that's all we have left to do once we set the poles, and then we'll have to wait for the guts for the panels here. As I said, it'll be after the holidays, so everything's right on schedule there as well. The freshman center, as I said, we're kind of doing as much as we can behind the scenes as we wait for the equipment to arrive next spring. The gas piping's ongoing on the roof, and we've done some demo that we can do without any disruption of the current system. So that's what we're doing there. Any questions on anything?
Mr. Ledger, if I would like to visit that Bibbage Elementary School project, should I reach out to you and schedule a time?
Yes, but it's not, you'd have to wear a hard hat and,
Oh, I know.
okay.
I know. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, then just shoot me an email.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, our Director of Business Services, Mr. James. Thank you, Mr. Ledger.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. My first item is to seek your approval for the donations that were in the board packet.
Motion to approve?
Motion by Mrs. Kelly,
Second.
second by Dr. Malco. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. My second item is to seek your approval for the professional leave requests that were also included in your board packet.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Marshall,
Second.
second by Dr. Medlin. Any questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay. Now is the time for my annual budget presentation. And so you, at your workstations, you have a hard copy of the printout. Whoa. And
That's a lights out presentation. right?
Is that good, Howard? Sarah, you can take Rob's seat since he's gonna be talking the whole time.
well, good evening, and thank you. So here we go. So most people think of a school budget as school year. It's one school year at a time. Unfortunately, in my seat, our budgets are done on a calendar year. The budgets are set by the state. Our funding is that way as well. So where many people look at things like this, I tend to have to look at things in the opposite way. So this is the budget presentation for the upcoming 2024 budget. We're going to go through the budget calendar, the steps that went into preparing the budget, the capital projects plan, the bus replacement plan, the funds to be raised, some historical comparison, and then the recommendation. So here we are, September 5th. We're going to go through the presentation. After this, I will seek your approval to advertise the budget and to post notice of the hearing. We will do that on Thursday. And then at our next regularly scheduled meeting on the 18th, we will have the public hearing where the public will have an opportunity to make any comments that they wish about what we see tonight. And then the first meeting in October is when I will ask the board to formally adopt the budget. So let's go back a little bit. We received our 2023 budget on December 6, 2022. Our assessed valuation, which is the value of all the properties within our school district boundaries, is a little over $5.5 billion. It's a little over 6.1 for our funds that are referendum funds. And the reason why that is higher is because that also includes properties that are inside TIF districts that have been established by the redevelopment areas by the 3 towns. Our AV increased 9.5% actually from 22 to 23 by $479 million. Great. And the AV is all based on the home values or the commercial property values, which is also set by what's called trend. So when the housing market has been really booming and a seller's market, so to speak, that increases the net AV for not only us, but for the libraries and all governmental units within that area. Indications are that for next year, our net AV is going to increase a little over 3%. And you're like, wow, how did it go from 9 to 3? Well, again, over the last year, the housing market has slowed down a little bit. Interest rates have been higher, so even though the property values have increased, they haven't been at the levels that they were potentially 2, 3, 4 years ago. So that is good. So most of our budget, about 70% of our funding comes through the school funding formula at the state level. And every 2 years, the state has a biannual budget. This past spring was the budget session. And before we can build a budget to say what our expenditures are got to be, just like in your household, you need to know what your income is going to be and then base everything off of that. So we're no different. So in the school funding formula, the state legislature put about $1.5 billion into K-12 tuition support for over the next 2 years. It's the largest dollar increase in history. We're very grateful for that. About $500 million of that was for the expansion of vouchers, where people can take state dollars and go to private schools. It's very controversial, but it is what it is. Another billion of it was an increase to public schools. When I say public schools, that is traditional schools like us, but also charter schools are also considered public schools in the realm of the state. So the funding formula was increased, the funding about 7.9% for this fiscal year, and then we'll go up an additional 2.2% in fiscal year 25. So the way the formula works is every school starts with what's called the foundation, where everyone gets the exact same amount per kid, and then it's adjusted for what's called complexity. So in the third bullet point, we talk about how the foundation amount is going up about 5.7% this year, and it's going to go up an additional 1.4. This is always good because it is money for all schools. It doesn't matter what your poverty level is. It doesn't matter your student population. That's just the foundation, and it benefits all. So on the second and third bullet points, you can see clearly that the state front-loaded the budget in year 1, leaving smaller / minimal / probably not keeping up with inflation increases the second year. But that's okay. We'll take the first year, and then we'll manage it the second year. In addition to the regular basic tuition support, there's other grants that we receive, as do all other schools. So special ed grants increased 5% in 24, and again will in 25. The NESP program actually had a large increase percentage-wise of over 34%, and then it's going to be 5.5% in 25. Again, $20 million more into the program over the next 2 years statewide. The high-value CTE level programs also increased 5%. And school safety grant, they put $5.5 million more into that each of the next 2 years. It's been, as we know, between SROs and school safety, that is a grant that many schools would like to apply for, but because of the match that's involved, sometimes it's more difficult. So by them putting more money into it, it might allow more school districts statewide to be able to tap into some of those funds. So this is just a review of the budget for K-12 tuition support in the state budget, and then how our portion per kid has changed over the last 6 years. And you can see just in from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year now 24, it's been a significant increase on the state funding side, which is great because all of our costs have continued to go up as well. So it's not just as if, oh my gosh, we have so much extra cash. We are using these dollars to keep up with our increased costs to put these dollars into the classroom and into our teachers and other staff members' salaries. So this prior school year, we were receiving about $6,500 per kid. That is increasing to $6,850 this current school year, and then next year at this time, I'll be able to tell you what the next one is. But again, there's been more dollars put into the formula, and we are very appreciative of that from our state legislators. So another challenge that we face for our revenue is our state support is based on our student count, which is called ADM. That's your average daily membership. So it's based on 6 months at a time. And right now, the state is using an estimate of what they feel our ADM count is going to be. And that is how they've been giving us money here in July and August and will be in September. But in reality, whatever our official count is in October is going to be what our funding is going to be for July through December. And then there's a second count in February, and that will be the basis for our funding for the first half of 24. So if we go back to the first slide in this presentation, this is a calendar year 2024 budget. So the revenue for that is going to be based on the ADM count in February of 24, and then the count in the fall of 24, and we haven't even had the fall count in 23 yet. So fortunately, we have a lot of projections. Our schools do a great job of tracking kids. We look at demographics. We have an idea of where we're trending, and it doesn't really matter how far out you look. Just having that data and not overexpending yourself, knowing what's coming down the road is the key. So currently, we are graduating approximately 200 more kids than we are bringing in as kindergartners. You can rough estimates about 800 going out and 600 going in or coming in. It's actually a little slightly less than that this past year. We had, I think, 773 maybe, but we're also under 600 for kindergartners this year. So initially the thought is, oh my gosh, we're going to be down 200 kids. Well, we're not, because this is still a destination of choice for people moving in. Right now, we're looking to be down maybe around 120. So that means approximately we had 80 more kids move in than move out. So people are moving in to the Tri-Town area for all the right reasons why we're all here. And we appreciate that. Now, of course, I put that second sentence in there that, well, if we were just even and wouldn't have lost any of those kids or be down. I don't like to use the term we've lost kids because we didn't. We were actually gaining more people moving in. You know, it equates to about $800,000 more money we would have had for this fiscal year if our graduating classes weren't just so off. We feel that, again, just looking down the road and seeing what your data is, we have a higher class still at the high school for the next year or two, but then those graduating classes are more in the 750s and 740 ranges currently. So then when we have kids coming in, even if they're at the lower amount on the kindergarten level, with the move-ins that we still get, we're hoping that will shrink what our difference is each year. So Before I go on to the next hot topic, any questions on that?
I have a question.
Sure.
When you mentioned high-value areas of career and tech ed, what are the high-value areas?
Well, there's the ones that are in high demand. I don't know the specific answer to like which specific programs.
High demand, huh?
But it's high wage and high demand. So that's where they want to put more funding into to steer kids into those areas. Not instead of just going across the board and putting money into, well, there's not much of a demand for that. They're focusing it on those areas. Okay.
But the support for the other areas will still continue?
Absolutely.
Because, you know, they have kind of messed with that over the years.
Yes, they have.
Are you,
There was at one point, I think it was in the original Republican version of the bill, they wanted to get rid of CTE funding altogether.
yeah,
And that obviously didn't go over very well. The Republicans got a lot of backslash on that. And then I think the Democratic version of the bill, or not the Democrat, but the Senate side of the bill, had it in, and then they compromised, and it was in there. So,
okay. So you don't think we'll need to worry about that this year?
I think you should never discount that.
Okay.
Low-wage,
No.
low-demand positions, they're going to curtail funding for that training.
Really?
That's been the trend.
so we'll see. We just take it a year at a time. And listen, none of us really like politics. So, but there's the House side of the State House and there's the Senate side, and they, even though they're both controlled by the same party, they differ a lot in philosophies on how they want to do things. So we just kind of sit back and wait each year to see what's the hot topic or what's going on. But as Dr. Veracco said, the CTE funding comes up a lot, but that's okay. You know, we just argue for it. So, okay. The next big piece of legislation was curricular materials. So in the state budget, the General Assembly also appropriated $160 million annually to cover the cost of curricular materials to school districts. So beginning July 1st, 3 months ago, parents can no longer be assessed textbook rental fees or charges for classroom curricular materials. So as a parent, that's great. You know, it's and that was the intention. Indiana was one of only a couple states that still had textbook rental, and this was a way to give financial relief to parents statewide. Great. As a parent, woohoo. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that the appropriation that they put in is going to be enough to cover the cost statewide. No one seems to have an answer of where the $160 million figure came from, but based on the estimated total population, student population statewide of a little over 1 million students, the Department of Ed is estimating that each school district will receive about $151 per kid for curricular materials. The little history for us, and we spend approximately $254 per student on curricular materials for our classroom. That is software, that is books, it is textbooks, it's all the things that our teachers do to make our schools great. We are not alone in this. Everyone across the region is in the same boat. Statewide, you have some rural areas that might be around that 150 because they don't have the extensive programs that we do or many schools do, but everyone's having a shortfall. So we're estimating it could be about $103 per kid. We'll see how this all pans out here in October. So what do? It kind of goes back to like, well, we can't charge the parents the difference. We still have these costs. Our high school and middle school directors did a great job of looking at our fees that and the expenditures we've had in the past, and are there things that we can maybe look to curtail or bring down. But, and this is me coming from the business side, I also don't want to take things out of the classroom that make our schools great. And why should kids be punished because they got a number wrong at the state level? So we adapt. That's what we do. So based on our student enrollment, we're probably going to be short about $1 million each year for the next this year and next school year, between what our actual curricular expenditures are versus the reimbursement for the state. So when we talk about that additional money we're getting per kid, or the money that we're fortunate to get from our taxpayers for our referendum, we need every penny of that, because we need to cover the shortfall from the state level. And unfortunately, it's got to come from the dollars. We just can't, we don't have the money tree to get it. So again, we talk with our peers, we talk with other people statewide, we look and see what can we do in order to help offset this so it's not hurting our students or our families. So we are in the process of looking at all financial options to reduce some of our operating costs out of our main 3 or 4 funds in order not to compromise those services. And we're going to get creative, and we're going to do what we can. As you know, I'm very involved, or rather involved, in our Asbo Citrus Association. You know, I would like to think that once this fall, all states, or excuse me, all school districts statewide are going to submit their claim. There's going to be some real hard data of what that shortfall really is. I don't know what the real number is. You know, if we were $250 per kid, you know, maybe a statewide average of $200 million will get everybody there. I don't know, but when the state just put $1 billion to K-12, maybe 2 years from now they can find another 50 million. I don't know, that's my hope. You never know what the economy is going to do between now and then, how much state revenue they're going to have, but instead of cutting the expenditures that make Indiana schools as good as they are, I really hope that we can try to increase the funding on the statewide. But they're not going to open the budget here in January in the short session. We're going to have to wait another 18 months and then play it from there. So this has been the biggest topic since this was all sprung upon us at the end of April. All right, before I move to expenditures, any questions on revenue? Okay. So expenditures, payroll and benefits comprise over 85% of the expenditures of our operating funds. A big piece of those benefits is our health insurance. We have a good plan for our staff, and we want to keep it a good plan. However, every year there's health insurance costs rise, not only for us as a school district and what we contribute, but to the employees as well. You hear about trend in the healthcare industry. It's why it's a nationwide topic every single year. What are we going to do about healthcare costs? Well, we feel that effect as well. We are self-insured. We control our claims. We have some high-costing claims. That's okay. That's what the insurance is there for our employees. We're glad we can provide that support to them. But we know that that is a piece of our increased funding that is going to have to go to cover the cost of increased health care as well. Our employees do a great job of utilizing generic drugs and not utilizing the high cost of the emergency room for non-emergency room types of things. Please go to the emergency room if you need it. We're not telling you not to. However, we know that's an increased cost. As business leaders and as leaders of the district, we know we need to cover that for our staff. Additionally, there's other things involved in that other 15%. So we have property insurance. That goes up every year. Utilities, more security in schools is a cost. Increased technology, cybersecurity is big. The measures that we put in place from our technology department regarding emails and malware and just trying to combat the bad guys is always trying to stay ahead. And honestly, the big thing is school buses. The cost of school buses has gone up about 20% in the last year. That's huge, especially when you buy 8 to 10 buses a year. So we don't get any additional dollars for that. It's just that bus that used to cost $120,000 now costs $150,000. And instead of getting $6,000 or $7,000 for a trade-in, you might get $1,500. So it just all are pieces to the puzzle of what we do. One of the things that the board has asked about in the past is circuit breaker. Circuit breaker is also called the tax caps, and this was what was put into law, I think 2009. It was a thing on the ballot, and Indiana voters said, yes, we want tax caps. I want my properties capped at 1%, 2%, 3%. And as property or potential homeowners, everyone says, yeah, that's great. Well, the problem with that is that the state determines what each level of government, each city or town, the county, schools, need to raise through the tax levy in order to support their operations. And it gets cut off at the tax cap, but there's nothing there to replenish the amount that you're short. So that is what's kind of called the tax credit, is what your loss is. Because of our high assessed valuation and the low tax rates that we have, our circuit breaker loss for our school district was just under $300,000 for 2023. So at first you're like, oh my gosh, $300,000. Well, we never really had the $300,000 in the first place, because we've had this kind of amount for a long time. This 2020 cliff didn't really affect us much. But that $297,000 is only about 0.5% of the total amount that would be levied to the taxpayers as for taxes. When you look at there's 16 school districts in Lake County. This chart shows what the certified levy was by the state. So the certified levy, again, means this is how much the state calculates that you should raise through property taxes in order to operate your school, city, town successfully. The circuit breaker loss is, well, because of the tax cap, this is how much of that money you are not going to they're not even going to bill. So for us, that $300,000 being 0.6% is very low compared to many of our neighbors here in the schools. And the towns are the same. So when you look at some of those communities up toward the top, so we'll just take Gary, they're the big one. You know, the state's saying they should levy $56 million. They're cutting off 26 out of it, so they're only billing 30. That's a huge shortfall, let alone what are their collection rates. You know, they're not getting 100% of that. We don't get 100% of our taxes that are levied. We have a really good 98% rate. Very proud of that. Thank you, homeowners and property owners and business owners. Thank you. But in the scheme of things, if you look at just this, we are not affected as much as some of our other neighbors are. And with our assessed valuation and us and as we say, keeping score on our low tax rate, this shouldn't be an issue for us, and it's not that much of an issue for the towns that that are in our communities as well for the same reason. This is just the same information, just in a chart form, and you can see that we are down there at the bottom, barely registering on the chart. So, in summarizing these 2 or 3 slides, circuit breaker does not really impact us here at Lake Central.
Okay. But it does impact those groups up at the top, the top.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
It's disproportionate, unfortunately, to sometimes the poverty level.
Wow. So the certified levy amount is determined by DOLG?
DLGF, yeah, you'll see it on our forms that I'm going to get to here in a few slides. The levy is, in essence, in simple terms, if you need $10 million to operate a fund, and you have cash on hand, and you have miscellaneous other revenue of $1 million, then you need to raise $9 million in order to support your budget. So the levy is the $9 million that needs to be raised. So the DLGF does the calculation based on what we submit to them, and they certify, yeah, this is the number, and that's the example. Yes, you need to levy your taxpayers that $9 million. But if you're one of those toward the top, maybe you're only getting the owners, the property owners in your community are only being billed 4 or 5 of that. So it puts them in a tough situation.
Is there any relief for them? I know at one point they talked about that. Has that come to
The,
fruition?
the problem is it's a constitutional amendment. So it's, the General Assembly cannot just go and say, hey, we're going to change it to 1.5%, 2.5%, and 3.5%. It would take another constitutional amendment to change it. And as property owners and farm owners, they're probably not going to vote in order to increase their taxes that way. So unfortunately, there really isn't I want to say a backdoor way to do it would to increase the assessed values of everything. So if my property was really valued at $100,000, but they changed the way they assess things, and now my property was assessed at $200,000, well, it's the same 1% that's against it, so theoretically, the circuit breaker would be a higher threshold, but it would take something significant like that, and it probably doesn't, it probably won't happen, because the other thing you have to remember is it doesn't affect the rural areas as much as it affects lots of these areas. And lots of times when they're downstate, if it's a Lake County thing or if it's a South Bend thing, they don't really care so much. It's just kind of how it is. So, okay. How are we doing on time? Okay, so the next piece is we're going to talk about capital projects. Part of the budget process is we have to do a 3-year capital projects plan. And this is where I sit with Mr. Ledyard each year, and we discuss projects that we would like to be able to potentially do here over the next 3 years as some of our buildings or pieces of equipment that we feel like we might need. The key word here is plan. It's a plan as of September 5th, 2023, and sometimes things change. And sometimes things don't get done and we have to push them to a following year. Sometimes we have an ability to knock out something that maybe we weren't planning on until the following year. But it is a plan, and we try to stick with it as much as we can. So each year, we allocate money for asphalt and roof repairs. These aren't large roof replacements. These are just fixes. We put money in the budget to replace desks and chairs at all of our buildings. It's on a kind of an as-needed basis. When the principal or head custodian talks to Mr. Ledyard, we see what we can do. There's often a lead time with those things now, and the availability of desks and chairs is not what it used to be, but it is what it is. So next year in 2024, we're looking at potentially painting and patching a soffit at Grimmer, continuing carpet replacements at Kaler. Really, Kaler and Holman are our 2 schools left with carpet throughout, but we're making a lot of strides there. We're looking to paint the gym at 3 of our elementary schools, some partial roof replacements at Holman and at Pfeiffer, and then potentially doing some renovation work at our transportation facility in the office. It's kind of cramped, absolutely. In 25, the big thing there would be at Kaler. To replace the gym floor and bleachers, we had to do some work there on the floor this past year. Bill and his contractors got that fixed, and we're going to get some more time out of there, so it's not as pressing that we have to do this right away. Again, painting some gyms, more carpet replacement at Holman. And then in 26, some parking lot paving. They're second to the bottom. We've had renovating the former special ed offices at Holman. We have it on here, but talking with the staff over there, they're really utilizing those rooms for some pretty creative things right now. So it's kind of like a placeholder on here, but as long as they're still getting good use out of it for the kids, then maybe there isn't a need to do that. But we just want to have it in a plan in case it comes up. As for purchases, next year we're looking at potentially getting a new delivery van, one of the snow removal tractors with the brushes that you see that clean the sidewalks at Coling, a new gator. A gator is a little piece of lawn equipment with a bed on the back. riding lawnmower, a trailer for our lawn equipment, our dump truck with the plow and the spreader is starting to get a little bit older, and then also potentially a new maintenance truck. Again, you have the years noted here. Okay, the next thing we're required to do is do a 5-year bus replacement plan. This is where we have to list all the buses in our fleet. We have approximately 90-some buses, and this is just a schedule for the first 5 years of showing what the estimated cost would be to replace those. Again, you can see that those 150s, this first one here, 120, that's one of the small white activity buses. Those have jumped, they've all jumped in cost. It's crazy. But again, it's around, I think this year for the buses we ordered in the summer, it was about $147,000 per. So we're rounding up a little bit for next year, expecting the price to go up. The special needs buses with the lifts, you can expect about another $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 on top of that. One of the things that you'll see is that the 4 trip buses that we used to have are gone. If you've driven past transportation, we got rid of those months ago. They just were not reliable anymore. We've had problems with them from the beginning.
You're talking the big ones?
Yeah,
With the special paint job?
that is correct.
Really?
Uh-huh. They were not reliable enough to take on really long trips. And so we were able to trade them in. And so here for next year, we're going to look at potentially replacing those, but with a different type of bus. One that isn't necessarily the traditional coach bus with the rear engine. Talking with the mechanics, those rear engine buses just really have a lot of mechanical issues because the engine's exposed, it's right along the road. But maybe there's a different design that we could look into, that it could be a white bus still, it could have the more comfortable seats, it could be painted, but just a different style or design to it. Okay, so this is a little hard to see on the screen, but it's probably better at your stations. But this is where we do the math to determine what needs to be raised through the tax levy that I explained before, what our budget amounts would be, the levy, and the estimated potential advertised rate. Also know that for those who've been on the board for a while, every governmental unit, not only schools, but every city and town, and the state even tells you you need to advertise high. Because if you shortfall yourself, you can only get as much as what you advertise for, and it's better to overshoot it knowing you have a cushion in there. And that's what we do. So what you're looking at here is what used to be called the 16-line statement, because there are 16 lines, and that's as simple as it gets. However, the DLGF has changed this form. It no longer looks like this, but I like the way this is presented instead, and I think it's kind of easier to follow. In essence, the top portion is what you're estimating your expenditures to be in the following calendar year. So in calendar year 24, how much money you're still going to need to spend for this 6 months from July through December of the current year, because this is really more of an 18-month financial outlook. And so this tells you your total estimated expenditures for the 18-month period, and it takes into consideration how much cash we had on hand at June 30th, how much more money we're expected to get not only this 6 months, but the 12 months and 24, and then the difference is how much we would levy for our taxpayers based on the assessed valuation that we talked about earlier, gives you an advertised rate. So this is our education fund. I'll be seeking to advertise a budget of $67.5 million. Our operations fund, $25 million. Our referendum operating fund, $13 million. Our debt service fund, $7,991,515. The pension bond fund, $1,328,248. And then the referendum debt of $12,390,000. When it comes to the debt funds, those are very straightforward. It's just like your mortgage or a car loan. You know what your debt payments are going to be. that is to the dollar of what those debt payments are going to be, and you raise exactly what you need. You don't build up a big cash balance. It is very straightforward. So as a comparison, here is what our current 2023 budget amounts are, and the numbers I just rattled off here for 2024 are what I will be seeking your permission to advertise. You can see our education fund going up a little bit because of the increased funding from the state. Our operations fund, we're looking to keep that level. A little more money in the referendum fund because, again, it's a set tax rate. When the assessed value goes up and you apply the same 17 cents, then you bring in some additional dollars. Our debt service amount slightly going up. This is going up because of the bonds for the Bibbage project that we sold last year. We started paying, we're starting to pay those, but also this spring, the board approved GO bonds for $9.9 million that we will be doing for some larger projects, and we will start repaying that in '24, which we had not, we haven't even sold the bonds yet here in '23. So that is for the $200,000 increase there. Pension bonds, very consistent. Referendum debt, very consistent. So last year we advertised a rate of 94 cents, and this year we're advertised, I'm going to seek your approval to advertise around 89 cents. I'm not going to go through all this, but this is for you to look at, this is a comparison of our tax rates for the last 6 years, and you can see this amount that we're going to advertise is the lowest we've had in the last 6 years. So we always say we try to keep score, and we are always looking out for our taxpayers. This chart shows each of the individual funds for those last 6 or 7 years, and the blue line at the bottom signifies what our tax rate has been, and you can see that we have been very consistent, and this would extend all the way back for the last 10 years. We are very conscious of that. So, in summary, my recommendations for the 2024 budget are listed on the screen, and I've already rattled them off, so I'm not going to do it again. And the estimates and the funds to be raised will be posted on our website and then the state's Gateway software website. Well, as I mentioned, we'll have a public hearing here at our next regularly scheduled board meeting on the 18th, and then adoption on the 2nd. And this is kind of what the notice on the Gateway system will look like. It'll explain just exactly what I mentioned here. And that's the second half of it, just summarizing those amounts. So any questions or comments from the board?
Well, as always, Rob, very thorough and very detailed, and we appreciate that. I had a question for you. I saw in there about you were converting a playground into a parking area, maybe? Oh, at Clark, I believe.
It was, yeah, there was where the basketball areas are.
Yeah.
It's Smarter saying they don't really use that for recess much anymore. So there was talk of like, well, we could potentially turn that into parking spaces for, more parking for when they have bigger events over there.
Right.
It's not a pressing issue, but it's something that we've kind of
Right.
had on there. Yeah.
Right. Yes, and I happened to notice in one of my walks before I had this damage to my hand, that our softball dugouts are not in very good shape. Now, I don't know if that falls under you, Bill, or under something that can be happening in the 3 or 5 year plan here, or where that falls.
The softball dugouts?
The dugouts, yeah.
We redid them last year.
They need paint,
We did them last year.
honey, they need paint.
I'll take a look.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did them.
Maybe it's the one further away.
Yeah, I know the softball was all done last year.
Because I was thinking to get a group of volunteers to just paint them.
We did the softball last summer.
So
Yeah, maybe it's the other one. I'll take a look.
Yeah, okay, well then maybe it is the other one.
Yeah.
all right, is that it?
One more question, Rob.
Yep.
This is a longer question, but you could get the condensed version. How do TIF districtings affect our budget?
So, in essence, if a property is in a TIF district, the growth, when a property is put into a TIF district, it's usually underdeveloped or not developed. And then money is put in to develop that area, and when it develops, then the assessed value of it increases. However, when the redevelopment commissions declare it a TIF area, that increase in the assessed valuation does not get added to the tax rolls. It is frozen at that lower level, and it only goes up slightly incrementally in the name. So how it affects us is, like I think I said, our overall assessed valuation was $5.5 billion. If we would, and so our tax rate is then based on that $5.5 billion of assessed value. If those properties were not in a TIF district and the TIF was gone or wasn't there in the first place, then that value of the $6.1 billion would be what our levy would be divided into. And so when you're dividing the same number into a larger number, the tax rate would be less. The flip side argument is, though, if those properties weren't a TIF district, some areas may not have been developed in the first place. And so you're not losing out on anything. So some TIF districts are great. They bring in development. Others, not so much, because if the properties were going to pretty much naturally develop anyway, then you're really shortchanging all the other governmental units that assess value and putting that property on the tax rolls, and the redevelopment commissions get all the money until the TIFs run out. The other problem is the redevelopment commissions often like to extend the TIFs past the length of the bonds just so they can use that money for them to repurpose it into the cities and the towns. So then they don't have to levy that money for do geo bonds themselves. They're like, hey, we got all this TIF money, we can just keep that and use it to develop blank next. So, some people are all anti-TIF, some people think they're all the great. It affects our tax rate for sure. But every community is different and every taxing unit is different, because it may not be affecting us directly that much here for us, where it could be completely hurting someone else. I take, for example, St. John. But they recently declared all of 41 to 231 and then down 231 a TIF district. Well, I think we can all naturally see that area is naturally getting all built up. They probably didn't need to create a TIF district, because that Strax and the Target and all that going down 231 is probably going to develop naturally over time. Unfortunately, then we lose out on the revenue. But they can make the argument that, no, it's been sitting vacant for 40 years and it's still going to stay vacant. Who knows? But when you're in a built-up community already and it's just a parcel of land or a certain small area, I don't necessarily think if they're the best thing. Some communities share that revenue with the schools. Some just say, you know what, no, we're keeping it all for ourselves because, again, we want to repurpose it into city projects or town projects. And that's completely up to the redevelopment commissions. There's nothing wrong with them, keeping that revenue that they're generating. So, it is
Thanks,
what it is.
Rob.
So,
But Rob, could they not share with the schools some of that revenue?
they could.
Oh, gosh.
They could.
Yeah,
But they don't have to,
And they will.
so.
But I don't know. I guess in essence, they do if they lower some of our fees.
They
to
could
the building
release some of
project.
those properties back onto the tax rolls for not only the schools, but for the county and the library and the township all to have. But that's their choice. You can't get mad at them for doing something they don't have to do. Sure, it'd be great to get it, but I think what irks most people in our position is when the redevelopment commissions extend the TIFs when everything's already all built up. And it's really like, okay, really? You already paid the bonds off? Come on now. So
So we can get mad then?
you can get mad then.
Okay, all right, cool.
So,
Thanks, Rob.
okay,
Thank you,
so
Mr.
before I
James.
leave the microphone, I will seek the board's permission to advertise the budget that I presented.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Kelly, Second by Dr. Malco. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very detailed. And now we're on to public comments, and we have one person signed up, and that's Mr. Robert Starkey.
I had some prepared, but man, now I feel like we could talk to Tiff for like an hour and a half. In a real quick example, for TIF, just a quick example of what we're doing. And Dr. Medlin, I want to recognize that she's at all of our RDC meetings, and we appreciate that. Calumet Avenue in Dyer, it's just soybean field every other year, it's cornbean field, or cornfield. We're using that area as TIF for us, so we're using that money. We're going to spend about $1.5 million next year to redo the intersection of Calumet and Central Park Boulevard. We're going to put a light there, we're going to do some acceleration, deceleration lanes, and that passes what in TIF world they call the but-for test. We couldn't do this but for these TIF funds. Once we redo that, then all of that open field property now becomes more valuable for a developer to come in. So the hope is that we can TIF something low, redevelop it to make it a little more appealing to developers, and then our hope is that restaurants, hotels, and that goes in there, raising the assessed value for everyone. I think our first TIF districts roll off in 26 in Dyer. Some of them can be renewed, some of them won't be, so hopefully we can help you out that way. So again, real quick, Bob Starkey, 509 North Gate in Dyer. I have a list, parent, resident, Protzman, HSA, PTO president, Dyer Town Council, and introduce myself here in my new position as the Dyer Town Council liaison to this board. So I wanted to thank Dr. Medlin for, we started a dialogue on some possible changes to the Protzman playground. I think Mr. Ledgerd, I think we have a meeting that we're going to be working on here to schedule about possibly a few changes to get some more accessibility for some special needs kids. So I wear that hat as a parent and the PTO hat, all the different hats I change here. Just wanted to thank Dr. Malkow for all of your input at our Dyer Park Board meetings. That's always appreciated. And just wanted to say thank you. I wanted to, as you guys are out and about, I wanted to send a special thank you to all of the teachers and staff at Protzman, aside from the fact that I have a 2-year-old that they take really good care of. They are the most dedicated group of professionals that I've ever seen. So as you're out in the schools, if you could relay that, I would appreciate that. So that's all I have. If you ever want to talk TIF, give me a call. So, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to board comments and consideration of future agenda items. Mr. Marshall.
Thank you. I will pass at this point.
Thank you. Mrs. Kelly.
Thank you. No comments this evening.
Dr. Medlin.
No comment, thank you.
Dr. Malco.
I was just wondering when we're going to receive the information. I think we had talked about via email earlier about class sizes, especially at at all grade levels. Class sizes.
I can send that to you tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't remember receiving that request, but I can send it to you.
Yeah, I think Mr. Howard, or Mr. Marshall saw something in the paper about, you saw something in the news about lack of teachers, and he was concerned about class sizes. Yeah, that'd be good.
I don't know if I raised that individual question, but
Yeah.
I'll take you at your word.
Thank you. And similarly, Misty, because
Yes.
I know there's needs at the middle school and high school.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Mhm.
That's it.
Thank you. And I have nothing, so we'll move on to our board calendar of future activities. Dr. Baraco.
Sure, we got a big homecoming game coming up this Friday with our arch rival Crown Point. Want to extend an invitation from the class of 2003. I sent an email today to all staff members. The organizers of that reunion committee have invited all of our staff members to swing by and say hi to some of their graduates who have stayed in the area and some who are coming back for a special celebration. And then our next meeting here will be Monday, September 18th. That's all, thanks.
Thank you. Do we have a motion for adjournment? Motion by Mr. Marshall. Second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.